Recognize the member from Ottawa Centre.
Thank you very much, Speaker. The motion needs to be read out first. I move that in the opinion of this House, the provincial government should match municipalities' funding contribution to operating and maintaining municipal transit systems across Ontario, and funding should not be used to replace or reduce municipal contributions to transit.
Here.
Thank you. Debate? Mr. Harden has moved private member's notice of motion number 154 pursuant to Standing Order 100. The member has 12 minutes for your presentation. I recognize the member from Ottawa Centre.
Thank you very much, Speaker. Thank you very much. So I want to begin this debate this afternoon by acknowledging the source for this idea. And I want to be honest about the source because it's an important source for the province of Ontario. The source is former Premier William Davis, one of the most successful politicians in the history of this province, Speaker, who I had occasion to meet once or twice when he was in this chamber. Mr. Davis, Premier Davis, was dubbed Transit Man of the Year in the 1970s. He authored a report called An Urban Transportation Policy for Ontario in 1972, the very year I was born. And Steve Munro, who's one of Ontario's transit experts, shared this report publicly. Mr. Munro's research is some of the research I've benefited from in understanding my role as the critic for public transit for the province. And I want to quote the following passage from this report in 1972 so we can appreciate why the standard I'm talking about in this motion is important for this House and important for public transit in our communities. So the report says, quote, from Mr. Davis's office, Premier Davis's office, my government has set as one of the highest priorities the full cooperation with municipalities to provide the best possible systems of urban transportation. I want to note for the record, Speaker, that Premier Davis made those comments in a context when a debate was taking place in the greater city of Toronto over the Allen Expressway and the creation of a major thoroughfare of a highway all the way down to what we now know as the Gardiner Expressway. And Premier Davis, at that time, opted against that idea, maintaining the ravines and the parks and the green spaces in the mid to upper sections of downtown Toronto, and threw a lot of funding into public transit with the explicit goal, if you read the report, of cost-sharing with municipal transit authorities, 50-50 cost-sharing for operational transit. That's critical. Why is it critical, Speaker? Because one of the things that truly hasn't recovered from the COVID pandemic that hit this world are our operational transit systems. I want to read out a few facts that have been brought to my attention from the Ontario Public Transit Authority, the organization that brings together transit agencies across Ontario for advocacy in this House. Because of a lack of funding at the municipal level, at the moment, over the last year, 18 municipal transit systems have had to raise fares, 13 municipal transit systems have deferred capital projects, 17 municipal transit systems had to draw on reserves to operate their transit projects, and 5 systems had to adjust or reschedule service. That is simply the reality. And it's important for this House because we've been having a transit debate as long as I've been the critic for a couple of years, and usually the way it goes is I make the demand that we put more money into transit, and the government describes itself as putting more money into transit than ever before, and the number $70 billion is tossed out. Just for folks watching at home, there's a difference we need to note here between funding and maintaining the systems that we actually have and the capital projects the government is talking about when they talk about their $70 billion plan going forward for transit. My motion is germane to the former, not the latter. Which is not to say we don't want new projects built. Of course we do. Of course we do. But, as that old expression goes, Speaker, the wheels on the bus go round and round, all through the town. And how do we make sure that happens? We got to make sure that money is put into the coffers of the municipal transit authorities so they can pay the drivers, so they can fix the buses, so the municipalities and their transit systems, all the administration, all that work. Thank you, by the way, to all the people working in the transit sector all over Ontario. Those folks need to be invested in for the system to work. I was having breakfast the other day with a reporter back home, Speaker, not far from the House of Commons. And the reporter was asking me, he knows I'm a big advocate for climate policy, that we need a more ambitious climate policy for the province and the country. And he was asking me about carbon pricing, because he knows it comes up in this House all the time, you know, for or against. Do we like what the Prime Minister is doing? Do we not? And I smiled and I said to the reporter, look outside the window. And right outside the window was the number 7 bus rolling through downtown Toronto. I said, you want a climate solution? It's right outside the window. It's right there. And recently, on October 28th, at a National Transit Summit at the House of Commons, municipal transit agencies, rider organizations, workers who work in the transit sector, they all got together to ring the alarm bells for our country that we are in, right now, the throes of what they call a death spiral in transit, where agencies are having to hike fares, agencies are having to reduce transit service, and because of that, people are not taking transit. And I am not surprised when my friends opposite talk about traffic congestion in our cities, in our municipalities. It is a real thing. But one of the ways we can reduce congestion, one of the ways we can make life more affordable, and absolutely to the reporter's question that morning, one of the ways we can have ambitious moves is to put money into our public transit systems. That's key. That's key. I want to reference a recent op-ed that was written by 2 transit leaders back home. These are the gentlemen that lead the transit unions at Ottawa's OC Transpo. Noah Weinberg, who's the president of ATU Local 279, and Jamie Larkin, who's the president of ATU 1760. What Mr. Weinberg and Mr. Larkin noted was that because of the cuts that we've had to implement in Ottawa, because we're not getting enough funding into OC Transpo has had to cancel more than 1,000 trips per week. We have 74,000 fewer service hours, and there are almost 200 buses, which is 26% of the fleet back home, sitting in garages in Ottawa waiting to be fixed because they're not suited for service. So the next time, if you're watching this from Ottawa, folks, the next time you're waiting for your bus to get to school or to get to your appointments, you need to know that there are decisions we can make in this House. And it won't happen overnight. I don't want viewers to be led to believe that. But if we commit to this idea that Premier Davis put on the table of equal cost sharing between Queen's Park and municipalities, we get back to that, we can take those nearly 200 buses out of the garage and put them into the communities where they belong, where somebody doesn't have to wait in Ottawa for 30 minutes in the frigid temperatures of December and January and February for the bus. That's critical. That's critical, Speaker. Back home, we have over 340,000 people relying on transit every single day. And the way we will help those folks is making sure the bus comes on time, that it's at a cost that's affordable to the user, and that we compensate the transit operators and the mechanics and the administration and all the staff that make it happen. We have to do that. It's not a nice to have. It's a must. I want us to think about public transit with that in mind too. In many countries around the world, I've had the good fortune to do some traveling myself. You go to a country in Europe, you go to a country in South America, as I have done, and you begin to understand that in those countries, public transit is as important to those societies as a utility like electricity or water, because it's how people get around. You cannot get elected as office holders in these countries if you don't make significant investments in public transit and intercity, intercommunity transit. Take the example of Germany, Speaker. According to research that's been given to me from Environmental Defense, Nate Wallace, one of the best researchers we have on transit in this country, it is common for a Canadian to use a intercity via train, which I know is outside the jurisdiction of this House, but bear with me, maybe once in every 5 or 6 years. But in Germany, it's common to use intercity transit at least 10 times a year. And they are vote-determining issues about whether or not office holders decide to invest in those public transit opportunities that help make those German communities among the most transit efficient in the world. And here we are in our communities in Ontario, Speaker. I know you're from the great area of suburban area, Toronto of Ajax, right? people fighting through thickets of traffic on the 401, one of the most dangerous highways in North America, when I believe we are not putting the money we need to operate the GO Transit service, to operate the TTC service in the city. We're holding ourselves back. Let me put it that way. However, we do have an opportunity. And again, I want to say for the record, it comes not from the history of my party. It comes from the history of the government's party. It comes from Premier Davis's declaration at the time to not go forward with a massive highway expansion through the downtown of Toronto and to invest that money, historic amounts of money, in public transit. And what did it ultimately lead to in my city, Speaker? The Transitway. If you've ever visited Ottawa, we had one of the most successful bus rapid transit systems through the 1980s in the world. If you looked at usage rates, if you used at the efficacy of how quickly people could get around, our first responder communities, police, fire, paramedic, would use the Transitway so they could get to where they needed to go quickly. But over time, we struggled to put the money into the Transitway, into the operating of our transit systems, and now we're stuck with a situation, according to the Mayor of Ottawa, where we have a $120 million hole in our transit budget yearly, where we went earlier, a couple months ago, to the community and said, we're going to have to double the cost of a senior's bus pass. We're going to have to take away the idea of being able to ride for free for seniors on Wednesdays and Sundays. We're going to have to go to the students at colleges and universities and say, I know we agreed to not hike your transit increases for your bus passes by more than 2.5%, but we're going to have to go a different route. We're going to have to go for 5%. So we are putting the onus on the user. And the funding system we have, insofar as my city is concerned, the money that comes to operational transit right now through the province comes through a share of a gas tax since 2007. What it amounts to is about $38 million for Ottawa's transit budget. That is less than 10%. Less than 10%. Nowhere near Premier Davis's goal of 50-50. So we can get this right. The mayors of Edmonton, Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, Ottawa got together with Equiterre, an environmental organization, with environmental defence, with transit riders, transit workers, on October 28th on Parliament Hill and called for the country to do better, and that's where this motion comes from. But again, I hope my friends in the Conservative Party, the governing party, realize the genius that Premier Davis had, and we can pass this motion and get going and put the wheels onto the bus. Thank you.
Further debate? Further debate? Further debate? From Toronto, Saint-Paul.
Thank you, Speaker. And it's an honour to stand today in support of the member's motion calling for a restoration of 50-50 net transit operations cost sharing between municipalities and the provincial government. I'm going to start with a little bit of a story. I use the bus, the train, the subways, the streetcars for most of my life. I don't have a driver's license. And many times you get onto the transit with the best intention to get to work on time, to make that wedding on time, to say your final goodbyes at that funeral on time, and it didn't work. And I would be one of those TTC riders who'd get really upset and, maybe not even say good morning to the bus operator because I'm so frustrated because the bus came 25 minutes late or whatever the case was. It's people like TTC riders, frankly. Yep. It's people like, Marvin Alfred, the president of ATU Local 130, and Brian Connolly, who introduced me to the Keep Transit Public campaign many years ago. And when you learn about those 12,000 workers, the bus, streetcar, Wheel-Trans and subway operators, the collectors, the cleaning staff, and the maintenance workers who are keeping our wheels on the bus here in Toronto on the TTC, you really realize that there are systemic challenges that cause those buses to be late and cause us to be late to that funeral, to that wedding, or even to that job interview. So I can't say enough how important it is. And it's not just me. 82% of Ontarians want the province to provide more public transit funding. I can tell you every resident in Midtown, thousands of us as we try to cram on to that train to head down to the downtown core, we want to see the province pony up its 50-50 and match the municipalities' funding to get our transit moving. It's crucial. It really is. It makes everyone's day better when we can get from point A to B and C easier. I also want to take an opportunity to thank Black Urbanism TO, one of our local organizations in St. Paul's, who have been staunch advocates for better transit, staunch advocates for the completion and opening of our Eglinton Crosstown LRT. I've spoken many times in the House about this project that's years delayed, billions over budget. That's a true solution that this government has the power to deliver for us in St. Paul's, to help with gridlock, and to actually get us moving. But we need to properly fund our public transit in order for it to work. But don't take me for the expert. Let's listen to the Ontario Public Transit Association. They too have identified public transit as an essential pillar of economic growth, environmental sustainability, and social cohesion. I think we can all agree. They've recommended enhance the dedicated public transit fund. They've also recommended for the government to match the Federal Canada Public Transit Fund baseline contribution. What they say is when governments don't step up and fund public transit, there are significant downfalls. There's rising costs, and that's rising costs for us as well as riders, and limited revenue tools. Over the past 2 years alone, transit operating costs have risen by 7% and 13% respectively, while Ontario added nearly 1 million more residents. So our public transit services, they want to keep us moving. They want our communities to be happy. They don't want people to be stressed out when they get to work. They want their operators to feel safe on the job, to be respected, and to be appreciated. And if we all work together at the municipal and provincial level, and if the government of Ontario stands up and provides our public transit agencies what they need financially, we can keep Ontario moving, and most certainly the residents of Toronto St. Paul's. Thank you very much.
For the debate, I recognize the member from London Fanshawe. University of Rosedale.
Thank you, Speaker. I'm proud to be standing here to speak in support of the motion introduced by my colleague and friend, the MPP for Ottawa Centre, calling on the provincial government to match municipalities' contribution to transit funding. We should all be able to easily get from A to B on public transit at an affordable fare. That's the goal. That's what we want. It's pretty simple. Unfortunately, at least in my riding and many other ridings across Ontario, that's not the reality today. We travel in overcrowded streetcars where we get to enjoy the smell of each other's armpits because it is so crowded. We wait too long for the bus to arrive in winter in very cold bus stops. We are late for work because the subway broke down. And I'm sure many of you who are using the TTC, the subway system in the TTC, can personally relate to that. The subway breaks down because it is not properly maintained. The lack of affordable and fast transit is why people stay at home, sometimes not socialising, sometimes not going to doctors' visits or the community centre. The lack of fast and affordable transit is why so many people continue to drive. It's contributing to our terrible record of having some of the worst commute times in North America. It's the lack of fast and reliable transit is why our transportation system continues to be the leading contributor of climate change and air pollution in Ontario, across the country. It is a big problem. There are some very practical solutions that we can advocate for, and I'm very pleased that the member for Ottawa Centre has brought one forward, which is to have the provincial government match funding to the TTC. When I think about this issue, I think about the many. I used to be the executive director of TTC Riders, so I did a lot of work on transit advocacy. And I think about the many people that I worked with and their struggles. I think about Biso, a Scarborough resident who used to walk in Scarborough to downtown in winter because she could not afford public transit. I think about Helen Liu, a community garment worker and organiser and leader in the Chinese seniors community who advocated with us until she passed away. She was so good at organising, and she never got to see the results of her work because she passed away too young. I think about the airport workers who want transit to Pearson Airport. And I think about the stories of baggage handlers who would tell me that they would sleep at Pearson Airport in the car park at night because their shift ended late and they had another shift very early and they could not afford to go home and come back. They just couldn't afford it. They would do it if there was good public transit, but they couldn't afford it. These are hard stories to hear. I think about Adam Cahoon, who is still politically active, who uses a mechanised wheelchair and who understands firsthand the indignities of a transit system that remains inaccessible to this day. I think about the many U of T students who would tell me what it would be like to travel to U of T Scarborough and have to share transit passes with their siblings and their parents because they couldn't afford to collectively all have monthly passes, and they would choose their class schedule and what courses they wanted to choose based on who needed the transit pass on that day. These people and thousands of others would tangibly benefit if this government got serious about investing in transit and properly fund municipal transit systems in Toronto and all across Ontario. People do not want to wait 10 years for these new transit lines to be built. There are practical things we can do right now to help people get from A to B at an affordable price. I urge you to support this motion. I know I will be doing so. Thank you.
Further debate? I recognize the member from Guelph.
Thank you, Speaker. It's a real honour to rise today and speak in favour of the member from Ottawa Centre's motion. The Ontario Green Party has long advocated for restoring 50% funding from the province for operations of local transit station operations. This was something that was part of Premier Bill Davis's, remind you, a progressive Conservative Premier's vision for the province. And I think the Premier realized at the time that the only way that we're going to build affordable communities, livable cities without gridlock, would be to have transit operations that were reliable, affordable, and accessible for people. But unfortunately, right now in the province of Ontario, when you have transit operations experiencing over $500 million operational deficit, it is incredibly difficult for transit operations to provide the services their residents so desperately need. I would add to Mr. Davis's vision that if we're going to have any hope of meeting our obligations to reduce climate pollution, transit is going to play a vital role. And I know many folks in this House, possibly in watching on the live stream, oftentimes think of transit as a big city issue, Toronto, Ottawa, maybe Hamilton. But it's a mid-sized big city issue too in places like Guelph, Kitchener. It's a smaller city issue in places like Owen Sound, Orangeville. As a matter of fact, I was just at an event the other night with the former mayor of Orangeville, Sandy Brown. And Sandy told me that when he was mayor, probably the best decision he ever made was to bring in free transit because the ridership went through the roof. Matter of fact, their ridership went up so much that they almost had a complete cost recovery because of the additional gas tax revenue they received. But why was it so important? Because students could get to school easier. Seniors could get to doctor's appointments easier. When we look at how transit can make a difference in people's lives, the member from Kitchener Centre was telling me about the Pathways to Education project, a nonprofit that provides free transit for disadvantaged students around the country. The Camino nonprofit provides $100,000 in the Kitchener-Waterloo region to provide free transit for students because it's so critical to their ability to access mental health services, to access school, to access after-school study programs that are vital to educational improvement. So what's one of the barriers to being able to offer programs like this where transit becomes more affordable? Is that the municipal transit box simply cannot provide the operational revenue that it takes to run a reliable, affordable transit system. And that's why governments around the world provide operational funding for transit systems. And Ontario is one of the few jurisdictions that doesn't do that. And it has real negative implications for the affordability of our communities. And I do want to echo the member from Ottawa Centre's concerns about the potential death spiral that our transit systems in big cities, mid-sized cities, and towns all across Ontario are facing right now. Because when you have a situation where they have to raise transit fares so much that it creates a disincentive for people to be able to afford transit, that means ridership goes down and transit services get cut back. And I'll give you an example in my own community in Guelph. All politicians in Guelph were challenged to take transit for a week. I went to the bus. It's a short walk from my house. I wanted to take the bus to the Stone Row Mall, which would normally take me about 10 minutes to drive or 19 minutes to cycle there, provided we continue to have our bike lanes to get me there. When I missed the bus, what would have been a 30-minute bus trip ended up being an hour and a half. I thought I could have walked there faster than that. And I'm only saying that because the implications of not providing operational funding for transit systems leads to experiences like that, which reduces ridership and reduces the affordability and livability of our communities.
Further debate? I recognize the member from Hastings, Lennox, Annington.
Thank you very much, Speaker. And Speaker, if I may, I'd like to take this moment. This is the last day of the session. I'd like to wish everyone in the House a wonderful holiday. I hope you enjoy your time back in the riding. I know I will, and I hope that the holiday season brings you closer and more joy with your own families and friends, however you celebrate. To my riding, to the constituents in my riding, I'd like to wish all of them a very Merry Christmas, the best of the new year, and enjoy all the time they can spend with their family and loved ones. Speaker, I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to this bill today. Because under the leadership of Premier Ford, our government has been investing and will continue to invest in public transit across the province. Speaker, from supporting municipal transit agencies to expanding the public transit network, our government has been a strong supporter of public transit ever since we were elected in 2018. Speaker, unfortunately, the Liberals, supported by the NDP, got nothing built while they were in government. They sat by as our communities grew, leaving people stuck in gridlock and on crowded subways. Unlike the Liberals and the NDP, we are saying yes to investing in public transit. Over the next 10 years, our government is investing $70 billion to build new public transit. This is the largest expansion of public transit in Canadian history. We are building new projects such as the Ontario Line, the Scarborough Subway, the Yonge North Subway, the Eglinton West LRT, the Finch West LRT, the Hamilton LRT, the Hazel McCallion LRT, and two-way all-day GO service. Right? Additionally, Speaker, we just recently signed a historic agreement with all three levels of government to replace the aging subway cars on the TTC's Line 2. Never before has this province seen this kind of progress to improve public transit. And yet the NDP and the Liberals still oppose building for our future. They voted against the largest transit expansion plan in Canadian history. The previous speaker said they support more transit, but they don't support more public transit. Instead of supporting our plan to build new transit, they can continue to say no to building transit. Speaker, it's clear they don't actually have a plan for public transit. That's why Ontarians re-elected our government with the second largest majority in Ontario's history. Ontarians support our plan, which includes two-way all-day GO service. Under our government, construction is well underway on the GO expansion. While the opposition voted against it, two-way all-day GO, we know communities such as Kitchener and Mississauga need more options to travel across the region. Speaker, the NDP and the Liberals voted against that two-way all-day GO train service. Time and time again, they've had the chance to invest in transit, and they continue to vote against it. Let's be clear. The Liberals, supported by the NDP, had 15 years to get transit right. They did nothing. They speak about affordable transit. They didn't get one fare done. In fact, Speaker, they voted against it. They voted against saving the average transit rider up to $1,600 a year by removing the double fares. We won't take lessons from the NDP when it comes to supporting transit. Unlike the previous governments, we ensure that every dollar is spent wisely to deliver tangible benefits to Ontarians. The NDP simply don't have a plan for transit. This is just another distraction from their horrible record. And Speaker, we're not just investing in the larger communities. We're also making investments to improve transit in our northern and our rural communities. After the Liberals cancelled the Northlander train, our government is bringing it back. The Liberals ignored the people of Northern Ontario who relied on that Northlander, but our government is focused on restoring that vital service. The return of the Northland will make it easier and safer to travel across the north. That brand new train will also reconnect communities and create jobs in the north. We're also supporting transit in smaller communities like my own through the Community Transportation Grant, which helps rural and northern communities continue to provide public transit. From the gas tax program, our $70 billion transit expansion, and the One Fare program, we have taken strong action, not just words, to support local transit. The NDP have taken every chance they have to vote against improving public transit. Unlike the opposition, as our population grows, our government will continue to invest in public transit all across Ontario. Under this Premier, we're going to continue building the largest expansion of public transit in Canadian history, and we're going to continue building Ontario for the future generations. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Further debate? I recognize the member from
London West. Thank you. Thank you very much, Speaker. As MPP for London West, I'm very proud to rise in support of this motion. Returning to a 50-50 provincial municipal cost sharing for public transit would really make a huge difference in my community. Earlier this week, the City of London released its draft mobility master plan for the next 25 years. The plan recognizes that if we want to move people smoothly throughout our city, we need to expand public transit. London is Ontario's fastest growing city, especially in the northwest part of the city, which is in my riding, and rapid transit is really the only way we're going to avoid congestion and gridlock. Fanshawe College, Western University are counting on reliable, efficient and affordable transit connections to move students and staff around the city. And with only municipal operating funding available, London Transit Commission has not been able to make the investments that are needed to make transit work for more people. They've actually been scaling back plans because so much has been downloaded by this province onto municipalities, which means city budgets are spread far too thin. Londoners want to choose transit, but they need the province to step up so they can make that choice. Returning to a 50-50 split on transit costs would allow the London Transit Commission to improve the services that are necessary to attract new riders. It would also allow London London to keep transit affordable, because we know that for many Londoners, transit is their only option. They can't, and if they can't afford the fares, they can't get to work. They can't get to the grocery store. They can't get to the daycare. They can't get to school. Right now, a single cash fare in London is $3.50. That's more expensive than the TTC. Londoners can't afford for transit fares to go up. They need the government to get back to the 50-50 split. Most importantly, Speaker, Ontario needs the government to step up and do this. We are in the midst of a climate emergency. We see it all around us. The only way that we're going to get people out of single occupancy vehicles so we can reduce carbon emissions is by offering reliable, efficient and affordable public transit alternatives. Speaker, not long ago, London had a plan for a majority of the London Transit Commission buses to be zero-emission vehicles by 2030. Right now, only 8 buses out of a fleet of 231 buses are hybrid. However, they've had to abandon plans for fleet electrification because it's too expensive. So any new replacement buses are diesel, which means that we're not able to move forward with green transportation solutions. I urge this government, support this motion today, get transit operating in this province. Thank you, Speaker.
Further debate? Further debate? Further debate? The member has 2 minutes for a reply. I recognize the member from Ottawa South.
Well, thank you very much, Speaker. Thank you. So I'm getting the sense that my friends over there may not vote for this. That's really too bad. All of us who are parents, you know, once upon a time we've raised toddlers. We know what toddlers are like. They get an idea in their mind, and it's like a walnut. You just can't crack it, beloved as they may be. The government is trying to tell the people of Ontario this afternoon, as I understand it, that they're building lots of things. But these are plans on paper, Speaker. These are literally holes being dug, running into problems. These are projects overdue, billions of dollars. And the one Christmas gift in transit this government did give us was the firing of Phil Verster from Metrolinx. You know, they talked about it like it was a voluntary resignation, but it came to light, Speaker, that Mr. Verster had a car allowance of $11,000 a year. The guy responsible for public transit for the biggest agency in Ontario, $11,000 a year, and the guy didn't even own a car.
Oh my goodness.
That's how clueless, sadly, transit management is in the province of Ontario. Brilliant plan, $70 billion. What are you doing for the personal support worker taking the bus to help the senior in Toronto, in Ottawa, in Windsor, in London, in St. Catharines? Nothing. You're cutting the money to her. The bus isn't going to come on time. Take your hands off your ears. Look at the people who actually drive the buses, fix the buses, ride the buses. The member for Etobicoke Lakeshore is heckling me. I've heard her say in this House that she's tired of road rage and traffic. I would agree. Maybe take the TTC to work and see how it feels to be with people crammed in a bus. Because that's the future, Speaker, if this government continues, like a toddler, to act as if it has transit solutions, when all they're building in Ontario, sadly, Speaker, are gravy trains and overpaid executives. Ontario deserves better.
Here, here.
The time provided for private members' public business has expired. Mr. MPP Hardin has moved private members' notice of motion number 154. Is it the pleasure of the House that the motion carries? I heard a no. All those in favour of the motion will please say aye. Aye. All those opposed will please say nay. Nay. In my opinion, the nays have it. A recorded vote being required, it will be deferred until the next instance of deferred votes. March 3rd. All matters relating to private members' public business having been completed, this House stands adjourned until Monday, March 3rd, 2025 at 10:15 a.m. I wish all members of the House a happy holidays, a Merry Christmas, and great time with your families. Thank you.